My name is Laura Goehrke, and I will be your host for tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and if you haven't already, we're here for you. That was supposed to be a joke, but, totally fine. Totally fine. All right. So, tonight is an evening of storytelling that's highlighting the experiences of LGBTQ people from all walks of life. We're very grateful for the Brooklyn Brewery for hosting us tonight. Let's give it up. And for being so gracious to support us. Big shout out to Lauren. Where's Lauren? Yes, over there. Huge help. To Jordan Reeves, who started VideoOut, who's an amazing person. He will speak more about VideoOut later tonight. It's this fantastic platform, a digital platform that archives coming out stories, and it is amazing. Also to the people behind the Stonewall Inn Gives Back, thank you very much for your support. So halfway through tonight, there'll be an intermission where you guys can mingle, grab some drinks. There's restrooms in the back. And then also throughout the night, we'll be showing short stories through video, which are also wonderful. So the stories tonight, that's what brought us all here. These stories are powerful, they're emotional, they shed light on the thrills, challenges, and effects of coming out. They speak to the courage and persistence for the continual fight for equality. And above all, these stories are vulnerable. One of my favorite quotes about the power of vulnerability is from the author Brené Brown. She says, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper, meaningful lives, vulnerability is the way." For me personally, I internally realized I was gay and was grappling with that during college. And I went to a liberal school. I had gay teammates, and my parents were super supportive. And it still took me a long, long time to publicly say it out loud. That was definitely the hardest part for me in my entire coming out journey, was sitting with the secret and keeping it inside of me. And the more and more that I came out to people and shared my truth, it became easier and easier. And that's what we're here for tonight. So we have 4 amazing speakers. We're going to start off with Eric Marcus. Give it up for Eric. Eric, you can step up. So Eric is most recently the creator and host of Making Gay History, a podcast, which mines, thank you, which, well, you thank him. We'll take your credit. Which mines Eric's decade-old audio archives of these rare interviews that he had when you were writing the book, Making Gay History. It is amazing. You can get it on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, makinggayhistory.com, and Google Play. It is amazing. I've listened to many episodes, and it is fantastic. Eric, you've interviewed a lot of people on this podcast. Is there anyone that you never had the chance to or still want to interview? I'm sure you've thought about this a little bit. Please.
So yes, and there was one who got away. Does everyone know who Leonard Bernstein was? Okay, well, sometimes people don't know. Does everyone know who Edith Ide was? She's more important to us than Leonard Bernstein. But that's another story. So I had reached out to a close friend of mine who worked for Leonard Bernstein and said, do you think that he would consider being interviewed? He wasn't out yet. And this was in 1988. And she got back to me quickly and she said, no, he's not interested. And then several months later, she came back to me and she said, I think he wants to do it. He asked me to talk to you. And I said, please tell him I'm still interested. And then he died a week later. So that's someone who I would have loved to have interviewed. Also, Bayard Rustin died in 1987. I didn't start my work until '88. So 2 people who I would have loved to have interviewed.
Well, you have a lot of great interviews already. He has a lot of great interviews already. All right, give it up for Eric, everyone. Thank you, Eric.
So I'm going to step to the side so Jordan can put up a photo. And Jordan Reeves is just extraordinary. First, I want to say thank you, Jordan, for this event and doing this. So I'm Eric Marcus, and I make Making Gay History. And that is my grandmother, May Marcus. How many of you have ever come out to a grandparent? I came out to my grandmother 30 years ago, and that's what this story is about. So just a little background first on my grandmother. My grandmother, May Sperling, came to America in steerage in a rust bucket of a ship by way of Hamburg. She came from Warsaw, Poland. She traveled in steerage with her mother and 4 of her siblings. Her 4-year-old sister, Pearl, died on the trip here. My grandmother was put in quarantine for 6 weeks on Ellis Island because she had diphtheria. She's a classic immigrant. Her family arrived on Orchard Street on the Lower East Side. They hated it. They stayed for about 2 months, and then they quickly moved to Brooklyn. And my grandmother loved telling stories about what life was like then. Actually, I shouldn't say she loves telling stories. She was really a classic immigrant. She pretended she was born here. She spoke perfect English if you don't consider a Brooklyn accent. Well, she had a very heavy Brooklyn accent, but she wouldn't have considered that an accent. So she loved to tell the stories when I asked her about what it was like living in that first apartment, and they had gas light, and you put a coin in a meter every time you wanted to get more gas for the light. So she grew up in a very, very different world than the one in which we live. And growing up with my grandmother, she always told me that when she came over and I was in the crib, standing in the crib, I always jumped up and down because I was so thrilled to see her. That never changed. I got out of the crib, but I still loved spending time with my grandmother. Now, I had no sense of what my grandmother thought about gay people until I was 15 years old, and my grandmother took me to Barney's on 7th Avenue and 17th Street in Manhattan and Chelsea. It's a different Barney's then. It was sort of for aspirational middle-class people from Queens and Brooklyn. And Grandma was taking me to buy my first navy blazer. And we're in the young men's department, and this man in a blue jumpsuit comes flying out of the stock room, and he's got a zipper from his neck down to, as my grandmother would say, to his pupik. And so my grandmother was this tall, and she motioned for me to come down and talk to her. And I put my ear next to her, and she said, "Fagula?" I thought, oh my God, this is not going to be good. So that's all I knew about what my grandmother thought of gay people, was at Barney's in 1974 or 73. So here's the scene. It's 1987. My first book is about to be published, The Male Couples Guide. And everyone in my family knows that I'm gay, except my grandmother. And the reason, yes, you said, except Grandma. Now, why hadn't I come out to my grandmother yet? Because everyone in the family said it will kill her. It will destroy her image of you. You would never want to do that to your grandmother. And I honored my family's wishes up until that point, and I said, but what, I have a book that's being published, she'll find out. Now, my uncle was the patriarch of the family. My dad's dead. It was funny that my uncle would say that it would kill my grandmother because she had lost a sister on the ship to America. My father, her son, had killed himself, and the fact I was gay was going to kill her. She had lived through a lot already. So he said, why tell her? Who's ever going to know that you're gay? You're doing a book about gay people. Who's going to know? So I said to him, I have to tell her, because in case it came out, I wanted her to hear it from me first. The exact story of how I came out to her is a much longer story, so I'm going to save that for another event. Needless to say, it was a painful moment for her. I was terrified, but she said the most important thing. Even though I could see her eyes were filled with tears, she said, "You know that I love you." Now, I know from my uncle that she cried for 3 days after that. And I felt terrible about that, but then I felt it was my family's responsibility to take care of her. I wanted her to know that I was gay so that I would know that she loved me anyway. That was important to me. So the family dealt with her. So, a few months later, my book is published. I go out on the road with the book. I'm on a show called CNN Newsnight Update at 2 in the morning. Who's going to see me on television at 2 in the morning? My aunt and uncle lived in Merrick, Long Island at the time. Thank God they're not here tonight, but I love my aunt and uncle. They lived in Merrick, Long Island. They had neighbors named Robin and Abe. Now, if you could imagine a Jewish American prince and princess to the extreme, that was Robin and Abe. Robin had hair that was like this with gold tips. Her nails went out to here. And her husband had matching hair. So they're in bed. It's 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm on a live show with call-ins. And I'm going to check with Jordan every now and then how much time I have because I have 5 minutes left. Good. I'll talk even faster. So I'm on the show where there are live call-ins. And Robin is awake in bed flipping through the channels. Abe is asleep. And she catches me on CNN Newsnight Update just as someone who's called in says, I just want to tell your guest, he's saying this to the host, just want to tell your guest that he's a faggot. So Robin slaps Abe, I hear about this later, Abe, look who's on the television. So crack of dawn, next day, they're at my aunt and uncle's door. And my uncle says, hi, what are you doing here so early? We saw your nephew on the television last night. You didn't tell us he was gay. I was like, so, there's a lesson in that. I'll save the lesson for the end. My grandmother took me for a walk a few months later. It was Mother's Day, and she never took me for a walk before. And she said, I'd like to talk to you. So we went for a walk, and she said, now I understand that you're gay, and that's not going to change. Now I should tell you, my grandmother was a thoroughly modern woman. She watched Dynasty, and she watched the Phil Donahue Show, and so she said, I know it's not going to change, but why do you have to tell anyone? So I said, but Grandma, you know, some of us, people who can do this, people who can talk about being gay and are comfortable doing it, have a responsibility to tell their story. And for whatever reason, I'm good at telling my story, and it's important. And she accepted that. And the remarkable thing about my grandmother, who I adored, was that she grew over time. And she went on the road with me when I went to speak at schools. And I remember sitting with her in Pennsylvania. It was Lehigh University. And we were sitting with a group of students, and I heard her talking to a young man saying, you should tell your parents, they'll get used to it. And I just loved hearing her say that to him. My grandmother became a huge fan of mine. She came to all of my book signings, and I had lots of book signings for the different books I wrote. She died at 102. She would have told you, she would have said it was 2 years too long. Because she made it to her 100th birthday under her own steam. She embraced I should have worn my glasses. How many fingers is that? 3. She embraced my partner within a month of meeting him. She sent us a note saying, to my 2 grandsons. She came to our commitment ceremony, and not only did she come to the commitment ceremony, once she heard my mother was inviting all of her cousins, daughter-in-law, she invited all of her cousins, and nieces and nephews. So she was at the commitment ceremony. She couldn't have been more embracing. After she died, I cleaned out her apartment with my uncle and aunt. And my grandmother was, as I say, a modern woman. She did not collect things. She was not a hoarder. In her little TV room in Brooklyn in Bensonhurst, she had a utility closet, and there was a shelf above the utility closet. She had 3 books. There was a Danielle Steele book, and I've forgotten who the other one was, and there was my book, Making Gay History. And I opened up the book, and there was the review of the book from the New York Times that she had saved all of those years. And I did what grandsons who've lost their grandmothers who love them very much do. I cried. She was someone who demonstrated to me and to lots of other people that if you give people a chance, they have the opportunity to grow. If I hadn't told my grandmother what I did, she would never have had that opportunity. And she discovered this whole world of people and became so comfortable that there was a wedding I was invited to, and I told her I'm going to this wedding, and she said, 2 boys or 2 girls? And I said, one boy, one girl. Oh, one of those. So if there's a lesson I hope you'll take away from this story, it is that we need to give the people in our lives the chance to change and grow. It was something my mother often said. And my grandmother, if she were here today, would say to you, don't miss the opportunity. Give your family a chance. They need to know, and you need to know that they know. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jordan.
I think that it's really important to be, not just come out to people around you, but come out to yourself, because you want to be true to who you are and be your authentic self. It's no fun living a lie and living in the closet.
My biggest resource for coming out was watching YouTube videos of people that had come out to their parents or to their friends or, you know, to their grandparents and recording it and putting it online. And
it's a terrific project. I hope that it helps many people by showing the diversity of who we are and the diversity of our stories. I hope it's a repository of the richness of our community and contributes to our history at this point in time.
Oh yes, I think it's very, very important to archive these stories. I think what you guys are doing is so beautiful because it does normalize the experience. And again, the message of, you know, you're not alone. There are other people, there are support systems in the world for you. I think that's a very, very important thing. And I think you guys are providing that. You know, that like, I'm not a freak, I'm not a weirdo, I'm not, you know, maybe I am, but maybe I like that about myself and I choose that for myself. I choose those adjectives to describe myself because I wear them with pride. Or, you know, you want to be as normal as possible because that's a thing too. So all of these different stories and the vast spectrum that are these stories, I think are very, very important.
As a psychotherapist, I think that hiding oneself and having to be closeted or secretive about anything causes a great deal of psychological trauma and damage. And I think coming out and facing who you are is very empowering.
Please tell your story. And whether you think it sounds like somebody else's or whether you don't think it's exotic or wonderful, it is your story, and we need to hear all stories in order to really appreciate the vibrancy of our community as a whole.
Thank you so much, Eric, for sharing that story. It was lovely. Next up, we have Melissa Sklarz. Give it up for Melissa, everyone. So, Melissa is the Director of Development at Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, and she's been an LGBT activist and advocate for over 20 years. And she's also the first trans person elected to office in New York. Very amazing. So, Melissa, you were just saying you were born in Manhattan, you grew up in Long Island, and now you live in Queens. Yes. Do you have a favorite?
Yes. My mother and father were married in Brooklyn. So. Actually, what I'm considering doing is running for assembly out of the 30th Assembly District next year in Queens. So right now, Queens is my favorite.
One more question. Would you ever move to Staten Island?
Absolutely not. Thank you, VideoOut. Thank you, Jordan and Laura. This is amazing. I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to be here with all of you. You know, there was a time where to explain a transgender journey, we had what we politely called Trans 101, to go through all the explanation, all the definitions and the details, and looking out at all of you, I'll bet you know more about this than I do. So we won't have to talk about that. My story has good news and bad news. And, you know, the bad news is my story is mostly an immense amount of pain and struggle, suffering, most of which is from me. The good news is this model of gender transition is done. It's not going to happen anymore. Our future of a community is not transparent where you transition at age 70 or at Caitlyn Jenner at age 65. Our future is Jazz Jennings, where you transition at age 9 and you go on YouTube and you explain to a generation of young kids, you're not alone, you're not unique, you're not a freak, there are people like you out there and I am one of them. That is not my story. So what is it like to transition before YouTube, before Facebook, before computers, before cable TV? It's complicated. You know, when I was a little kid, I didn't know whether I wanted to grow up and be Katy Perry or Derek Jeter. I would say Myrna Loy, but you probably don't know who she is. And you know, there are styles. When I was a kid, there were no sexual orientation. There were no gays and lesbians in school. You had sissies and tomboys. That's it. Sissies and tomboys. And I was there, and I was obsessed by this idea that I was this little kid who was really good at playing ball, who was obsessed with being female. I didn't understand it, didn't know what it meant. I had no role models, no understanding. And I found out that my little friends did not share these feelings. And I just assumed as I would get older, I would grow out of it and become like everyone else, you know? And as I got older, it didn't get better, it got worse. It got much worse. And I discovered that in books, there were stories, similar stories. When I was 11 years old, I read in the newspaper, in the Metro section of the New York Times, yes, in the old days, the newspaper used to have sections made from paper, which is made from trees, and I was reading the paper, and like every good 11-year-old, and I turned to my mother, asking her the question every mom wants to hear, "Mommy, what's a transvestite?" In this age, before Stonewall, people would get arrested. Men would get arrested if they were caught dressing like women in the street. That was against the law. They would get arrested, and it made the front page of the Metro section. And my eyes lit up. It's like, they described everything she was wearing. Amazing. And what is this? And so my mother nervously explained, and from that point on, I put down my baseball glove and I went to the library and I read every book that had anything to do with this. I read the nonfiction, the fiction, the novels, science books, psychology, crime, anything. I read every book in the library to try to understand what this meant, that there was something that I was feeling that was out there. As I got older, I had zero coping skills, and so I decided that my father is like a hobbit, right? He's this little tiny person covered in hair, big hands and feet, and I looked at that and went, yikes, you know, I'm built like he is, and so puberty was pretty awful, and so my solution was simple. It was massive amounts of drugs and alcohol, you know, because I figured there was no way in the world that this crazy idea that I had would ever come to fruition, that there was no way it could happen. And as I got older, things got worse. They got much worse. And, it got to the point where I found out that there was a whole community of trans people. I started hanging out with trans people the 1970s. Go to 8th Avenue, Gilded Grape. Times Square was great. Gilded Grape, Casa Dario, the Grapevine, the Barnum Room. Barnum Room was awesome. Roz was disco bat, you know, but they were so beautiful. They looked like fashion models. They were the most gorgeous, most feminine. And I was an outfielder, and you know, and I couldn't, and so more drugs and alcohol. And finally what happened, you know, my solution to my problem overwhelmed me. And so I had a girlfriend, and she wanted to move in with me, and I said, you can't move in, you know, you have a terrible drug problem. And so she said, okay, let me leave my stuff here. And I said, okay, and she never left. And that was the end, you know, so I still had a job in those days, and she would turn tricks. And one day, they came, the marshal came, put a padlock, and I had no place to live. And when I went to rehab, I explained to them, I feel like a woman. And they went, oh, that's amazing. We have no idea what you're talking about. But they sent me to the center, to the Gender Identity Project. And there, to my shock, is a community of people like me. And they didn't look like fashion models, and they didn't look like movie stars. You know, they looked like just people. And I was able to find a community. And so I prepared to transition, and I started hormones. I was so excited, I told my assistant at work 2 weeks later I was fired. I was out of work 4 years. I did all sorts of gigs, right? Everyone knows about gigs. I did crazy things. The best thing was I was a cocktail waitress, worked in a duplex, in heels, balancing drinks. I was awesome. Awesome. And when I was able to get a part-time job, and then I was hired full-time at Gay Men's Health Crisis, and it was for half the money I was earning, and I went home and I cried because I had a job with benefits, $22,000 a year. Eventually what happened at the Gender Identity Project, they liked the way I processed my feelings, and so what they did is they made me a counselor, and people were very upset. Here it is now, it's 1994, and where are we going to find resources? And there were none. And so I went out looking for resources. And people listened. You know, transitioning in those days, they had never seen it before. There were streetwalkers, and that was it. That's really all they knew. And then in the midst of all this, I came along, and I was clever, and it worked out. And in time, I was able to explain to them. You know, we see so much about trans civil rights here in New York. I can tell you that there was a time where none of these people, these great champions, knew a thing, and they had to learn. Things that you've known since you were 8, they had to learn. And so I taught them, me and my friends. I wasn't alone. And over time, you know, people that believe in the future embraced it, and people that don't understand, we explained it to them. And a very small minority said, you people are insane. But here in New York, being different has a place. New York is a beacon. People come here from all over the world. You perhaps have come here from all over the world to be LGBT, to be straight, to live here in Brooklyn, to hang out at a brewery. How great is that? And trans people are like that too. Trans people come from all over the world. They want a safe space. They want a spot, a place to be authentic, a place to be free and out and open, and to find life and to find love, you know. And so now, this story for me is almost 30 years now. I've been me longer than some of you have been you. So, and you know, whatever the shortcomings are, I can live with it. You know, I may not be Katy Perry, but I'm still a good ball player. but it's fine. You know, the me that I've become is good enough, you know, and it's taken a lot of work to get to that. And I take a look at great personalities like Janet Mock, and then like Jazz Jennings, who I so respect and admire. And the future is, you know, is good, where people are not going to have to suffer for years with a gender identity that has no meaning, but in fact as children. And then my job will make sure that they have the resources they need to be successful trans kids and mature into successful trans adults. So thank you, VideoOut.
My favorite part about being me, I mean, I like learning things. I like reading books and finding out more information and talking to people and like making and like thinking more deeply. I think just knowing that there's always something more to learn, and knowing that even if I may not always have the like all the answers, there's still like a place to go from there. I think that's my favorite thing. And I don't know, maybe that's my favorite thing about being human, maybe not just being me.
I'm a trans woman here today who works for like a government program, you know, and is helping people like me to be themselves. And I think that's great. I'm gonna be doing this till I'm like 85, maybe older.
My favorite part about being me, I don't know why people like to listen to me, but people call me like a ham. I'm very funny. I make very serious conversations, fun conversations to have. I'm glad that one of my personal identifiers, being a wooer, aligns with my personal mission.
I'm still figuring out the way that I, Amy, am gay, and I think that's fine. And I also get to keep coming out. You know, people say, oh, that makes sense, or oh, you don't seem, or, you know, and ultimately I just get to keep saying every single day, yes I am, and it's still a little scary, but it's actually really great.
Our queerness is our power and our magic, and it's like the fairy dust in the air that just makes the world actually like pulsate and shimmer, and that should never, your queerness should never become the thing that hardens you and makes you mean. Your power is in like being full of grace and like kindness, even if you're being met with like such bullshit.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back for part 2 of tonight. So before we jump in, a quick shout out to Topo Chico, fresh mineral water, free over there. So after tonight's event, please grab some, put some extras in your purse, your bag, your backpack, whatever you'd like. All right, so I'm gonna put this here. So first, before we jump back in, we have Stacy Lentz here. Give it up for Stacy Lentz. You guys may recognize her. She is all over New York. She is one of the co-owners of the Stonewall Inn, the bar itself. So give it up for Stacy. And she's also the CEO and founder of the Stonewall Inn Gives Back, the organization that's with us here tonight. So here, Stacy, you can, if you want to. So you guys had some tell us about the amazing beer we're drinking tonight.
Yeah, it's been so much fun out here. We would always come out here to work with Brooklyn Brewery, and thank you, Brooklyn Brewery, so much.
Yes.
This has been such an incredible project, and just so everyone knows, 50 cents of every pint of every beer sold goes to the Stonewall Inn Gives Back initiative, which is incredible. What we're doing is we're working with grassroots LGBTQ organizations, typically in the Midwest, the South, or remote areas around the globe that don't get the recognition and they still struggle being out at all. So we are really, really partnering with them, letting them use the Stonewall Inn name, the Stonewall Inn brand, our social capital to make a difference. And we could not do it without people like Brooklyn Brewery. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
And also thank you, VideoOut. This is an amazing event.
Yes, Jordan.
Coming out stories are so important. And I hope everyone in the room feels inspired when you leave this. That's what it's all about. And I think it's a great, incredible experience to kick this off during Pride Week for everybody. We hope to see you around at some of the Pride events and everything. First time the Pride Parade will be on TV, New York TV, Channel 7. So who knew that we'd come so far? And it's because people came out and made a difference. So again, thank you guys so much. Don't forget, find the beer at Stonewall, Duplex, other places, and also check out stonewallinitiative.org. That's the charity and nonprofit. There's ways you can give, get involved, so we can all make a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacy, so much. Give it up for Stacy. The beer is amazing. Who's enjoying the beer tonight? That's great. It's very tasty. All right, so our next storyteller tonight, his name is Cesar Francia. Give it up for Cesar.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
You want to have the mic stand, actually? No. Okay. So, Cesar is a former Brooklynite. You're an immigrant, and you are currently an associate at Arendt Fox LLP, and you're focusing on anti-corruption, compliance, and immigration law. Now, it says here that you're also a food enthusiast, so I'm hoping that you could tell us your dream meal. If you could just set the plate for us.
Wow.
Maybe a drink, main course, side, dessert if you want.
All right, let me try this. Since we're here in Brooklyn Brewery, I would say that every single aspect of the meal would have beer, right? So we're gonna have, to start, we're gonna have an amazing salad, you know, just simple with tomatoes.
Yes.
But the dressing would have beer, right? Then we're gonna have ramen, and the broth will be beer.
Yes.
And then we're gonna have ice cream, and the ice cream will be Brooklyn beer flavored. How's that?
That was literally amazing. So, also something very special. Tonight is your first time publicly sharing your coming out story ever. So give it up. If we could just give a slow clap real quick, just a slow clap. And then, all right. Everyone give it up for Cesar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right, so I have to admit that I'm a little nervous, but that slow clap, it's getting me going. Are you wearing protection? That's the first thing that my mom told me when I came out to her. Are you wearing protection? She didn't give me a religious rant or rebuke or what are we gonna tell our friends and family speech. She was concerned about my health. She was concerned if I was wearing condoms. And that is emblematic of who my mom is. She's a caretaker. She thinks about these things in moments of crisis, in moments of chaos. Years after, though, she confessed something to me. She said, I've been going to therapy for a long time, not because you're gay, but because I was ashamed that I couldn't embrace you right away. Again, incredible. For someone to be so thoughtful and self-reflecting about my journey, about my story. She said, You're perfect. Your hang-ups, my hang-ups, sorry, are not your burden. I'm sorry, she says. Meanwhile, I've been feeling extremely supported by her in my coming out process. I introduced her to my boyfriend. I had her sit through this awkward but funny meal with his mom and didn't speak the same language. But this is my mom. This is the beautiful person that I call my mother. Unfortunately, my coming out story with my father was not the same. It was rather traumatic. My father is a man who didn't finish high school, someone who hasn't been exposed to the world and doesn't know any gay people. Well, now he knows me. And so I was really scared to come out to him. I was really concerned about what would happen to me. My relationship with him was transformed by two events. The first one was his separation from my mother. They separated when she discovered that he'd been cheating on her for 14 years at that time. And I resented him for that. And the second event was our moving to the States. My mom and I moved to the States in 2002, and I didn't hear from him for years. And I resented him even more because of that. But every time I would go back home for holidays, for Christmas or summer, my mom would encourage me to meet up with him, to try to rekindle our relationship. And against my will, I did it. It was the winter of 2011, and I was resolute that I would come out to my father. It was my biggest fear, and I had to conquer it. I'd met a beautiful man in DC. His name is Zach. And I fell in love for the first time. And he taught me to love myself. He challenged me. He taught me to celebrate our love, and he encouraged me to do it. And so I told my father to meet me at the cafeteria at the food court of a mall in Caracas. And looking back in hindsight, I probably felt like I needed to have people around us in case it went south. And here it was. I was ready to tell him. And one big inspiration had been Zach's family. I remember coming to meet Zach's family and me being greeted by his dad and getting a huge kiss and getting a huge hug and being told I love you by people I barely even knew. His family became my family. And so I said it. I knew I couldn't use the words I am gay. I wasn't ready to utter those words to my father. But I told him, tengo novio. I have a boyfriend. And my dad, who is extremely dark, went pale and speechless. And then he goes, you need to leave. I don't want to see you. You disgust me. And then I left. And I told myself before going out to meet him that his words wouldn't hurt me. I'd been estranged by him from him for many years. He didn't have the power to make me feel bad, but I was wrong. I wasn't prepared for the call that I would get later on, in which he said, I want to kill you for being gay. I want to kill your mother for making you gay. And I want to kill myself for having a gay son. And then I went in a downward spiral, one in which only a magician like my mother could take me out of. Through her words, through her touch, through her presence. It's been a long journey since those days. And those of you that know me know that I'm an optimistic, I'm a happy guy, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. But this moment, that memory, it's still very raw, very sensitive, very touching, and very, very moving for me. It's unresolved. And while I gather the courage to perhaps forgive him at some point, while I gather the courage to process everything that is still going on, I've managed to learn how to love myself, and to love others. I've fallen in love a couple more times after that with 3 beautiful men, Zach, Joel, and Trevor, who's here tonight. And though our romantic relationship has ended, you keep showing up for me. You keep showing me love. And I thank you for that. These men have showed me that love is love is love. These men have given me hope. And in the words of Jesse Williams, just because we're magic, it doesn't mean we're not real. Thank you. So when I was on my way to that mall that day to tell my father, I was out in the city and I saw my sister randomly. And my sister told me, don't come out to your dad out of spite or out of revenge. Come out for you. And I didn't follow her advice that day. But tonight, I'm finally coming out for me. So thank you for being here.
I was going to wait till my mother passed, but I might as well tell you. I sold sex toys at the Pleasure Chest. That was the first job I had. So I want to talk about the AIDS crisis because in 1978, when I worked at the Pleasure Chest, now there were 50 employees. There are only 2 of us that are alive today. So 48 people had died of HIV/AIDS.
And I get tested, and I pretty much can assume what the test results are going to be, but it's different when you hear it. And I remember walking out of his office onto West End Avenue, and my life had changed. It was January 22nd, 1986. The reason I remember it was my 30th birthday. I'm 61 now. I've been HIV positive for 30 years, more than half my life. I wasn't supposed to be this way. I was supposed to be dead in 5 years.
We were the warriors. We were the front line in terms of medications, and I always think that had it not been for my timing with that second bout of PCP, I don't even know how I lived through 2 bouts of PCP, but if I hadn't lived through that second bout and then gotten on the cocktails, I wouldn't be here to talk to you.
At the peak of the AIDS epidemic, all of my friends were male. One friend in particular, his name is Louis. Louis, I'm still sad in my heart that you didn't tell me, Barbara, I have AIDS and I'm scared. And I can't save you. That makes me very sad. Everybody is dying. You and everyone I love. I feel like I want to cry. I didn't have to explain anything. He didn't have to explain anything. That's why it hurt me when he didn't tell me or say, I'm sick, and I don't know why, if he didn't know it was AIDS, because there were a lot of names for it at that time. And everybody was trying, media and the world, medically, was trying to define what this outbreak is going to be called. How did it get here, and why does it stay? That's what I know about AIDS. He said I lost my friends, all of them.
Give it up for Cesar again. That was a beautiful, beautiful story. Where is he? Yes, there he is. Amazing. So you want to jump over to the mic, sir? So our last storyteller of the night is Michelle Lopez. Can we hear it for Michelle, everyone? Michelle is an AIDS activist. She's an immigrant, and she is a proud mother. She's currently the campaign coordinator for NY HIV treatments work and the co-chair for the Consumer Advisory Committee at New York State Department of Health. So Michelle, you have 2 children.
Beautiful children.
Beautiful children.
I'm a grandmother. I'm a grandmother.
Never would have guessed.
I'm a grandmother. Yes.
Never would have guessed. So Raven and Rondell.
Raven and Rondell.
And do you guys have any fun summer plans, seeing that it's now the summer?
You know, there is always fun plans in my house. Seriously, always.
Can we come over to your house this weekend for Pride? Is that okay?
Yes, do it.
Great.
Yes, and I can cook my ass off. I'm a really good cook.
You guys want to go over to Michelle's house?
Seriously. 557 East 82nd Street, Brooklyn, New York, 11236. And I'm between
11236?
Yes, and I'm between Forster and Farragut.
What's the train?
Hurry. All right. Hello.
Are you bringing stuff?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, we'll get a list. We'll get a list. It'll be a potluck.
It's a list. Seriously. Jordan, you coming too? Yeah.
Jordan will obviously be there. All right, well, Michelle, we're excited to hear your story. Thank you so much for being here. Let's give it up for Michelle.
I'm going to first start off with a disclaimer. I came out to my parents and didn't even know I came out. Seriously. I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from Trinidad. So, Trinidad via Venezuelan. I got parents of some very hot cultures, right? My mom is Trinidadian, my dad is Venezuelan. So I lived in both islands for a period of my time because my parents were separated. You know, at a very young age, they were separated for whatever that reason. But I want you all to picture a 13-year-old girl coming home one day from, I was in high school at the age of 13. And my teacher, what happened, because I lived so close to where the school was, if I did as much as, just sneezed, the teacher will know, I'm going to call your mother, because my mom was a true West Indian woman. She would have the hair tied up, and she was always at home doing laundry. So, all right, whatever that was for. So, you know, we have in Trinidad, our school setting, it's pretty much, we have our locker area, the locker areas are there, right? And then, the classes, where our classrooms were, was nice and lit up and bright in another area of the school. So normally, who hangs out in the locker area was the kids in there who got themselves in trouble. But what was Michelle doing in the locker area? Michelle was kissing the girls. Yes, she was. Yes, that's what Michelle did in the locker area. So my math teacher, this was coming down to the last week of school, she decides she's going to come and check the locker area for all who is cut in class. And who did she find in the locker area? Michelle kissing a girl. She didn't just find Michelle in the locker area. Michelle was in there smooching with a girl. So I remember my teacher, seriously, Miss Phillips was her name. And Miss Phillips, she said, she stood there for like a good 5 minutes. And she looked. And I'm telling, the girl, her name was Allison. I was like, yeah, let's do it some more. Let's give her a real show, And we did. So when she finally had enough, Miss Phillips finally came over and she tapped me. She said, I'm giving you all in my West Indian dialect. I'm going and call your mother right now because this one is new. She said, this is new. She calls my mother. Now here is the West Indian woman. She comes in, she was doing laundry. In Jemima hair tie, on the head, right? I mean, flip-flops, we wear flip-flops. And she comes into school in that same attire. Miss Michelle, and she's calling me out. She's calling me out. Miss Michelle, yes, you little wretch. I'm like, little wretch, what is going on? The teacher really called my mom. My mom comes, now we're in the principal office, because this is now, you know, they've taken it out of the locker area. This was new for them. They have never seen two girls kiss, you know. Y'all remember, y'all know that song, I Kissed the Girl and I Liked It. That was a hit with me and I didn't even know it was a hit. Katy Perry, was that? Who sang that? It was. So my mom comes in now, we're in the principal office, and here she is, you know, in her little attire. She said, Michelle, the teacher just called me and told me you was caught in the locker area. Michelle, did I hear right? You was kissing a girl? This is Michelle now, because I was very rebellious. I kissed her, and I like it, and I'm gonna kiss her again. Ladies and gentlemen, what did my mother do? She said, oh Lord, I gotta take you to the priest now, because somebody threw obia in my house and you got it. That's what they call, they don't say voodoo in Trinidad, we say obia. So she just knew that someone, you know, threw obia, because that's how we say it in Trinidad, somebody threw obia in my house and you caught it. Ladies and gentlemen, every Friday until I was 16 years old, right? I had to be taken, I was taken to this, he claimed he was an exorcist. And when I got older, then I knew what it was that he was mixing. This man used to mix castor oil. Okay, we have, yes, darling, that's what he did to me in Trinidad. He mixed castor oil. There was something we have also too called Angostura bitters, right? All the things that have that taste. And he would mix this concussion, and he gave it to me to drink. And then, you know, when I drank this, he will then stick his hand down my throat and said, I gotta get the demons out. I gotta get the demons out. This child is possessed. Now, if you do that to a child from the age of 13 until they're 16, I'm gonna be throwing up. I'm throwing up. So every time I would start, I would gag and I'm throwing up. He said, the demon's coming out. Everybody move. The demon's coming out. The man did this to me. So finally, you know, my aunt came down to Trinidad for Carnival, because people, y'all gotta go to Trinidad for Carnival. It's lovely.